Sighing slightly, Sherry takes the bandages from the tray beside her and begins to gently bandage the arm of the man lying on the stretcher in front of her. Her movements were slow and light as possible as to not cause any discomfort. That man, as well as the people in the place, had already been through a lot. Victims of bioterrorism attacks, among them some unlucky souls who were just at the wrong place at the wrong time. All things considered, the catastrophe was contained quickly, and there were a few fatalities considered how disastrous the incident would have been. Thanks to the BSAA, everything was resolved without the death toll reaching to thousands. Still, as much as she was used to stitching, bandaging, and treating victims such attacks, she would never get used to that reality. Sometimes she even felt too small and just hoped that these viruses would be extinct. She sighed again and placed the remaining bandages on the tray beside her. All done. You'll feel a slight burning feeling for a while. If you're too uncomfortable, you can call me. I'll have someone come check on you later, okay? She explained in a soft voice, smiling reassuring at the man, who shook his head in understanding. Okay, thank you very much, he thanked her, and for a brief nod, Sherry turned and left the medical ward, walking through the corridors of Terrace Safe Hospital. The corridors were long and several people came and went, in and out of rooms. The hospital was huge, accommodating any patients. It was amazing to think how much such the organization had grown all those years, had become known. They were now completely trusted by the people due to their actions all over the world, with several headquarters set up in various countries around the world. In fact, they did everything to help those in need, bringing education, medical assistance, food to victims of attacks, or just the regions that did not have access to these things. Yet it seemed like even with all this, they never did though. This was something she thought of on a daily basis. Chris said it was because she was too young and hadn't learned yet, but she had controlled over many things, but still. As she walked, she occasionally waved to some of the acquaintances or people she had worked with before. The people were there nice. Not everyone was likable, but everyone there seemed to have the same goal and shared the principles for the most part. A little further on, she saw a woman carrying some boxes towards a room at the end of the hall. The woman was having some trouble balancing so many boxes, and the girl quickened her steps. As she approached, she acted quickly when one of the boxes fell forward and managed to catch it and still in midair. There was still something sharp in the box, and she suppressed a small groan of pain as she felt her hand being cut. Beside her, the woman grumbled softly as she saw the box had fallen. The woman's brown eyes met the girl's blue ones. A tender smile appeared on her lips. Oh, hey, Sherry. Thanks for the help. Neil wouldn't be too happy if this box broke, or any of the patients who need those things, the woman said, opening the door with her back and walking into the room. That was a small storage room that was in full swing, full of medical supplies. No problem, Anna. It's rare to see you alone, Sherry said, placing the box on the shelf nearby. Anna was a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s. She had dark hair, brown eyes, and somewhat tall, a few inches taller than Claire. Even she had a good body, the result of physical training. I can say the same thing for you, Anna replied with a small smile, ranging from the boxes that determined on the shelves. I was just going to see her now, actually, Sherry said, watching Anna slap her hands together, cleaning up the mess. Well, Lucy is in a meeting right now. Apparently they're sending some of our people to headquarters in Africa. I don't know why, but anyway, thanks again for your help, Sherry. And by the way, where are your friends? Anna asked, leaving the room with Sherry following right beside her. Josh and Ellen are in another wing. This time they were in charge of counting items and organizing them, Sherry replied. Friends. She had friends. At first it was hard to think this, but she had a certain difficulties mingling with other related to people. But other time, she had managed to get around. Great then. See you later, Sherry. And stop growing up like that. While you'll be bigger than Claire, Anna joked, and Sherry just nodded with a friendly smile on her face. She quickly turned around and continued on her way towards the exit. The hospital was literally next to TerraSave headquarters, at least a particular hospital. Not that it changed much, but there were times where she was sent to the hospital almost to the other side of town. Not that it bothered her. Before she continued on her way, the girl looked at her hand. As always, her wound was already healed. There was not even a trace that she had cut herself. No blood, no marks, no scars, nothing. This happened with any kind of injury she had up to that point. She never told Claire about it, not because she didn't trust her, but simply because it was too absurd. She didn't need a genius to know that. A tribute to her body. She just couldn't tell. However, it also didn't take a genius to know that Claire probably suffered from something similar. There were times where she acted too weird. Well, she just shook her head. Neither she nor Claire told each other, even though they were already suspicious. And if they were okay with it, then what difference does it make? Sherry walked through the garden in front of the hospital, a large garden where some people walked with patients in wheelchairs or just to look at them for a walk. That place was designed to provide with much possible comfort in its patients. She walked slowly through the place. Despite everything, she had liked the place. It was beautiful and a nice change from the depressing interior of the hospital. A short time later, she had entered the TerraSave headquarters, presented her badge on the entrance of the head in the elevator. As usual, the place was bustling. People came and went, only with more intensity haste. It certainly didn't seem to be easy for such a large organization. Sherry briefly greeted the people inside the elevator before entering and waited to get to her floor. Once she arrived, she walked slightly faster paced down the corridor. The floor looked more larger like an office than anything else. A short time later, she finally saw who she was looking for. Poor Claire, drowning in papers. This was one of the consequences for being required for trips on board. After the paperwork afterwards were deadly. Too many records and reports to do. Well, Claire had already mentioned that it didn't bother her, so not so bad, so she thought. The girl quickened her steps, but she non-stopped walking until she saw who was at the woman's side. Neil Fisher, the important figure to the company. He was responsible for observing the bioterrorist attacks around the world and acting on the situation, sending aid to the affected areas. It was common knowledge to know that he was a strong contender to the newest leader of the organization. Not only that, but she was kind to her boss. Neil was known for the gentle temperament, as his patience was willingness to help others. Everyone saw him with the high expectations. Everyone but her. Sherry did not like Neil, even when she did know the reason for her dislike. But something inside her said that Neil was not to be trusted, and she had something hidden from others. But it wasn't like if she could just tell anyone or believe in her suspicion. Neil never gave any indication of anything out of the ordinary. Not to mention that, well, Claire kind of likes him. It was kind of the fact that the Redfield had been opening up the recent years. At first she was a bit cold at times and a bit reclusive, but as time went by, her relationship with people were improved. Just like her, Claire also had people that she would call friends. Sherry sighed slightly as she watched Neil walk away, and it was her turn to approach. Claire had her head down, writing something on a piece of paper, with almost no blank expression from many notes. "Hello, my least favorite Redfield," she greeted her, and Claire looked at her with a small, debauched smile. "Oh, please, I know you adore me," Claire said, smiling slightly at the girl, who just shook her head dramatically. The woman had changed in all those years. She had a happier expression with such a stronger glow than she had a few years ago. Her hair had grown a bit, and she had slightly more features, although her face was still very youthful. "I agree to disagree. So did the perfect gentleman come to ask you out finally?" Sherry asked, crossing her arms and looked at Claire with an arched eyebrow. The woman, for her part, ducked her head slightly and blinked a few times at the question. "I noticed that you hid a sneer in your voice," Claire said, and Sherry shrugged. "Your impression," Sherry said, and Claire just sighed slightly with the briefest shake of her head. "No, he didn't come to ask me out, actually. He came to talk about you," Claire said, and Sherry arched an eyebrow in mild surprise. That was unexpected. Claire opened the drawer beside her and pulled out the name badge. She had placed the name badge in front of Sherry, who wanted it for a few moments, until she widened her eyes and alternated her somewhat reclusive glaze between the badge and the Claire. "No way," Sherry said slowly, and Claire propped her head up with a head. "Congratulations, you just got promoted," Claire said, as Sherry took her newest name badge in her hands. Unlike the other one she was wearing at the moment, another one in her hand was blue, which indicated she was now the same rank as Claire. In other words, now, the same missions that women could do, she could do too. "Great! I thought they said I was too young for the higher rank," Sherry said, changing her name badge to wearing her new one. "Well, they did, but you're old enough to be my assistant. After a few compliments, Neil especially spoke well of you," Claire said, showing off her own badge with a small, excited smile. "Thank him for me, then," Sherry said, making a small grimace soon after. "Chris isn't going to like it very much." "Yeah, well, Chris, I guess he'll just have to deal with it," Claire said, also with a small grimace. "But this time, he can't be the only one to worry. I know you're mature enough as it is, but keep that in mind that the missions you'll be doing from now on will be quite different from what you've been doing, Sherry," Claire said in a serious manner, her voice giving no room for any kind of joking or smart remark, in a tone that woman rarely used with the girl. Sherry stared at it for a few moments, understanding the seriousness of it that was at stake. In response, she just nodded after a few moments. "I understand, Claire. That's why you've been preparing me to know?" Sherry replied, and although her face became softer, Claire still remained a serious expression. "Yes, although no matter how much we trained, it's never enough. The situation at hand is pretty bad," Claire said, writing a few more things in her papers in front of her, before folding them up and putting them on the chart. "Really? Okay. What happened?" Sherry asked, and Claire, before answering, looked beside her before nodding slightly to the girl to follow her. The woman stood up and they both looked at her beside the room at somewhat of a quicker pace until they reached the cafeteria. There was no one there and no cameras inside, only one in the corridor. Claire stood in front of Sherry. After some time in silence, she sighed slightly. "Krauser's mission was a failure," Claire said, and Sherry slightly watched her eyes, while still remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "His whole squad died, and he disappeared. Well, they are having him for dead now. The outbreak hit some remote cities in South America. Lots of victims." Claire sighed slightly, crossing her arms. "Well, I can't say not much, at least, because they'll send a file to me when it gets closer," Claire said, and Sherry bowed her head slightly. Neither she nor Claire liked Krauser, but he was a piece of shit to most of the time when they met him. However, after so many deaths, so many victims, it was still a sad thing. It's not much like they wanted his death. At least not Sherry thought. He wasn't so sure about Claire. "So, this seems rather intense situation. Did they let me be their assistant?" Sherry asked, not wanting as she was hesitant or pleased, but with her promotion. But it was somewhat unexpected. "Yes, they did. We need people with experience, and even though you're young, you've shown yourself capable enough," Claire said, giving the girl a light pat on the shoulder, as a way of trying to soften things intense atmosphere that they had formed. "Anyway, look, I have a few more things to take care of. I'll talk to you later," Claire said, and Sherry arched a playful eyebrow. "Things to settle with Neil by any chance?" Claire made an indignant expression, and Sherry played along innocent. "No, Neil and I don't, you know," she said, simply deflecting the question, and Sherry just shrugged. She didn't like Neil, but what could she do? If he was good enough to get in through those walls that Claire put around her heart, then he was good enough, she hoped, although it had a bad feeling about him that just wouldn't go away. "Okay, if you say so. We'll talk later." Sherry said her goodbyes and turned around, walking quietly from there. She could feel Claire's eyes on the back for a few moments, and a few moments later, the woman who also moved to finish her business. With that, her week passed more slowly than she ever wanted. Her training was doing good with Claire, was good for expressing the anxiety she felt, until they found themselves in a completely helicopter, that was taking them to South America. She had always wanted to see other countries, to see the diversity of the world, the different people, different cultures. South America was beautiful. If it wasn't for the rather bad reason, she would have tried to enjoy her trip there. In the distance, she could make out what appeared to be a BSAA helicopters, along with some native organizations. The BSAA was quick to respond and called out for contain the outbreak. If not for them, the virus would surely have spread much further. The helicopter began to descend, and Sherry looked at Claire beside her. The woman seemed a little lost in thought. She usually was in some new assignment. She would never know what was going on in the woman's head. As soon as the helicopter landed, it was as if Claire had come out of her trance, and both girls looked at each other. The woman smiled slightly at Sherry, gave her a small pat on the shoulder. Soon after, she rose from her seat and moved to exit the helicopter. Well, there was her first excitement as an official member of TerraSafe. This was an opportunity to make a difference. Walking through the corridors of the base of operations, Jill kept one hand in her pocket and the other hand held a report about Chris's last mission. Something had gone wrong. They lost contact with Redfield and his team approximately 6 hours ago. She knew that Chris, despite being hot-headed, could take care of himself. He was not regarded as one of those, if not the best BSAA agent for nothing. He had a title of captain for a reason. Jill opened the double wooden door in front of her and entered the meeting room. The place was huge, spacious, even though there were no windows at all. A computer in front of a long projector that showed a large screen on the wall. "Ah, Jill, finally time is running out," O'Brien said, pressing the button on the control of his hand, causing another screen to appear in the projection. "No dilly-dallying, great." Jill briefly checked the room. Other than her, the only person there was Agent Parker, along with some important figures with the BSA and FBC, such as Morgan Lansdale. "Jill," he greeted. In response, she just nodded her head. She did the same thing to Parker, before turning her attention to the large screen in front of her. "This was at the last minute of mission of great importance, so pay attention. Some time ago we've received information from someone anonymous about Vetro. Because of that information, we were able to locate and disable some of their lab's features and successfully find their base, as well as successfully repelling the bioterrorist attack on Terragacha. That cost us many men. The image of all the labs is closed by the BSAA up to the point where they appeared on screen, and they did an image of a large ship just as O'Brien finished his speech. Jill remembered the operation she had done in Terragacha. After they received that information, they quickly wanted to check those coordinates that they had found numerous ships and cargo boats were infected with the T-Ebis samples. All of them have been scheduled to take into Terragacha. Some of these ships have already reached the city. However, they had not been fast enough. As a result of the third city was sealed off, many people died, civilians as well as BSAA and FBC soldiers. But despite this, the rest of the city was saved. Before she was called out there, she was in charge of eliminating the remaining infected in the non-infected area. That's one of the ships that they were using. Chris was sent a small team to apprehend Jack Norman, founder of the organization. A tall man in his 40s appeared on the screen. He was bald and had a scar below his eye. 6 hours had passed and since then no contact. The last contact we had, Chris informed us about this ship was overrun with infected. Apparently Jack's group had become infected with the T-Ebis. Some of the BSA and FBC men are thought to be dead. Satellite images appeared, as well as the photos of all the dead members that were included in that mission. Jill crossed her arms as O'Brien went over the last audio he had with Chris, saying that the infected were everywhere and the ship was practically taken, but that Jack was still there, wounded by one of his bullets. When the audio ended, O'Brien changed the projector screen. Picture of Jill and Parker appeared. "You and Parker will be in charge of investigating the ship and rescuing Chris and his men. You will take whoever you deem necessary, and you only have 5 hours to accomplish the mission. If you fail, we will bomb the ship without second thought," O'Brien explained, and Jill and Parker squinted at the information. "If time runs out while you're still on the ship, we will bomb anyway," Morgan said. and Jill stared at him for a while, her serious gaze fixed on the neutral one. Nothing personal, of case. We can't take the risk. If that virus spreads to the oceans, we will be in the catastrophic results, he said, perhaps in a way of explaining himself, or simply at the sake of saying it. Either way, it served as a mid-tease to Jill, and she knew that Morgan was not very fond of the BSAA. This altered her gaze between him and O'Brien for a few moments, before nodding. Yes, sir, she replied, with the petulance of her voice masked by the strictly professional one. She turned and left the room, hearing Parker's footsteps hurrying to catch up with her. So, anyone in mind for the team? He asked, after walking beside her for a few moments, and Jill snorted. A small smile appeared on her lips. Me and you and no one else. Chris may be hot-headed, but he's not careless. But put someone to keep an eye on Morgan. He's always been hostile to us. I'm not too convinced Wall was infected who cut off the communication, she replied, noticing Parker shaking his head beside her. You suspect it was him, really? He asked, as she just shrugged. It is for good measure. He's the one acting the hostile here. Quite frankly, I'm sick of his attitude. I have the slight impression that he doesn't just do this just because he doesn't like us, she replied, and Parker continued to stare at her for a while. Are you sure? This isn't going to be easy, Parker said, and Jill looked at him with an arched eyebrow, causing him to sigh in defeat. Okay, I'll see you in a bit then, he said, turning right at the end of the hallway. Jill walked with him away for a few moments, until she turned another hallway and headed towards her quarters. The ancient slowly backed away as the creature approached. The cave he was in now narrow, making his mobility difficult. Sure, that might suit him, but this creature was smart and had a humanoid appearance. Its legs were long and muscular, protected with some resident skin, and the creature had 7 arms, all of them perfect for defense and attack. All the arms were strong, almost bulletproof, ending with each sickle-like claws at the end. Its neck seemed to join its protruding back, and its face was deformed, as if it had been melted with acid and become something more animalistic, with a mouth that was sharp teeth. His pistol didn't have much effect, although more powerful than ordinary pistol. The fang's fixed skin protected the creature, and the creature seemed to be intelligent enough to protect its weak points, whatever he fired. Well, that would be a small problem, if it weren't for the magnum he carried in his holster to his left thigh. He took a powerful weapon and pointed towards the creature, which as soon as it saw him, raised his weapon in its direction, used its claws to protect itself. No matter how resistant its claws were, a pistol that caliber, specially modified, would be used to get its greatest amounts of damage as possible. This would certainly have some effect. The creature was pushed back violently as he fired. A roar of pain echoed throughout the cave, and the creature fell to the ground. Its claws were now hanging by somewhat of a muscle due to the left side, and the side of the creature's muscular shoulder was bleeding. The agent then looked at his weapon for a few moments, and this time he had fired the shot of the gun since it was finished. It was modified for damage only, so it was a bit difficult to aim, and the recoil was violent. But he was certainly a weapon that can handle the job, as well as hit the shots. The creature roared and stood up. The ancient put his line in the fire again, but it was fast. With somewhat of its 7, now 6 arms, the creature threw itself quickly towards the agent, trying to grab him with his sharp claws. However, the agent dodged by ducking and throwing himself forward. The creature reacted almost immediately as soon as it landed. The infected leans of its body forward, with all of its arms thrown towards the slingshot. They had stretched out as if they were made of rubber, trying to thrust through like fast spears. The agent jumped back as soon as he landed on the creature, already launched himself in this direction. Ghost's eyes widened slightly as he felt the body being thrown to the ground, and grunted in pain as he felt his shoulder being punctured by one of the claws. The creature roared above him, its huge mouth trying to open and devour his head completely. However, Ghost just squeezed through the trigger of his magnum into the creature's chest. An explosion of flesh, organs, and skin took place behind the creature, which roared its last roar, fell on top of the agent, who grunted, and he felt the weight on top of him. Squirming and trying to ignore the pain in his shoulder, he had left his magnum on the ground when he saw that he just couldn't put the holster in yet, and crawled up there, getting up soon after to get the creature off of him. The path he had used to get there was stained with blood. Some large creatures with long limbs, no skin, almost muscle, but extremely long bones were lying on the ground in pools of their own blood. Above that place there was a village, except now there was nothing, as the creatures he had killed had eaten everyone who lived there. Then there was some kind of nest underground. The ancient then looked at his shoulder and sighed. From his back pocket he took some of his medical items, cleansed the wound, and bandaged it. He wouldn't recover quickly even without the herbs. The ancient picked up his magnum and placed it on his holster. Then he turned around and continued in the cave. His communicator buzzed and brought it up to his ear. "Ghost base here. How's the mission progressing?" Hear the voice of his aide, Philip, if not been mistaken. "I'm glad you asked. I'm reaching the nest. They gave me a nice welcome party," Ghost replied, noticing a small tablet vibrating in his pouch. He picked it up and looked at the information on the screen. An eyebrow was arched as he saw the picture of Chris Redfield next to the image of one of Veltro's ships. "We have received information that something's gone wrong that's happened in the BSAA mission. The team said they have sent to apprehend Jack Norman, lost contact with the base. Jack is still there alive," he said. Ghost ran through the files that they were sent to him. "I thought the BSAA would be more capable of that," he said, looking at the satellite images. "Actually, we can't blame them. They have to follow the rules. Not to mention Hunk found something interesting while he was investigating," Philip said, and soon some email images appear on the screen. Ghost read all those images that probably no longer exist in their original resources, as he laughed a little, shaking his head. "Ah, of course, you mean the head of the FBC was exchanging private emails with the leader of the bioterrorist group. Should I show that to his wife?" Ghost asked, putting the tablet in his pouch. "Only if you want to, but you shouldn't either show it to Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield," Philip said, and Ghost arched a confused eyebrow. "Why to them? Why not to that guy O'Brien?" "Because he and Morgan work together, and even though with some humanity, until we are sure he's not involved with anything involving Veltro or any bioterrorist organization, we won't send that information to that base," Philip replied, and Ghost picked up his pistol. Reloading it had stopped walking the cave in. "What do I have to do?" he asked, his eyes fixated in front of him. "It's pretty simple. Both Jill and Chris have been sent to the ship Queen Zobia. We will send you there. You simply have to find them and deliver this information. And if Jack is still alive, help them eliminate him. You think you could do that?" Philip asked, and Ghost shook his head. "Looking forward to my team first assignment. Roger that. I'll finish things up here and then go on from there. Ghost out," the ancient said. With his free hand he reached for his magnum. In front of them there was a nest. Those creatures were prowling around the place without even realizing yet. They were numerous, something like that with walls, flesh with mixed with something. He had no idea what it was or what were around the walls. Armed with only 2 pistols, he could never finish a job. But what little they'll C4 would do in the cave with the slight risk of collapse.